Welcome back. I'm Cassie, and this is A Wicked World. The story I have for you today is about a little boy whose mother betrayed him after his father left her. This had made the mother become angry, bitter, and incapable of dealing with anything on her own, including her own son. This is the story of Dylan Scanlon. Dylan Scanlon was born on October 1st, 2016, to his mother, Claire Scanlon, and his father, Gary Keenan. He also had an older brother named Sean Keenan. Dylan was a happy, funny, and cheeky little boy who was full of excitement, especially about doing new things. He also loved going to school and playing outside at either the park or by the lake. Dylan's parents, Claire and Gary, had met in 2005, and shortly after, Gary would take on her older son, Sean, as his own. But in 2014, Claire's mother, whom she took care of full-time, died from Huntington's disease, which is a degenerative and genetic condition. It can cause problems with uncontrolled movements, emotions, behavior, and thinking. Claire was beside herself. Following her mother's death, things changed for Claire. Struggling to cope with her loss, she was prescribed the medication mirtazapine for depression and anxiety. 2 years after that, she would fall pregnant with Dylan and give birth to him in October of 2016. For some reason, however, Gary, his father, was never put on his birth certificate. And around the same time that Dylan was born, Claire began to experience the same symptoms of the disease that had killed her mother. Claire's speech, her ability to walk, as well as her reaction time had slowed. And due to this, her mental health took yet another hit. In 2020, Claire and Gary's relationship had begun to break down. Claire would accuse Gary of being an alcoholic who had anger issues. And eventually, Gary would end up moving out of the home that he shared with Claire and their 2 sons. This was sometime between Christmas and New Year's Eve of 2020. Claire did not handle this breakup very well at all, and she became very bitter towards her ex. She began losing weight, not taking care of herself, and leaving the house a lot less often. And since her anxiety and depression was clearly getting worse, her doctor increased her dosage on her mirtazapine prescription. Dylan's mother, Claire, had also become obsessed with trying to get Gary back, and she would text him multiple times a day, as well as leave voicemail after voicemail for him. Then, in September of 2021, Claire found out that Gary was seeing a new woman. This only made her send him text messages more frequently, and they started to become abusive. Gary had been trying to see his son Dylan for quite some time, and even though Claire would tell him that she was struggling to deal with him on her own, she still wouldn't let Gary spend time with his own son. That is, unless it was convenient for her at the time. And Claire had also left Gary a voicemail saying that she was struggling emotionally and financially ever since he had left her. But Gary said at that point he was actually providing financial support for their son. So, tired of not being able to see Dylan, Gary began working with a solicitor, who then sent 2 letters to Claire at the end of 2021. These letters were only attempts for Gary to be able to see Dylan, but they only made Claire even more angry and upset with him. And it wasn't just Gary that Claire wouldn't let see Dylan. She wouldn't accept help from anybody. She even stopped answering her phone and the door if anybody came by. Now, Sean, Claire's older son, would say that his mother had become mental and that his younger brother Dylan had become her coping strategy. He said that ever since his father Gary had left, Dylan had become Claire's reason for getting out of bed every morning. So Sean had noticed that his little brother was getting caught up in the middle of this mess, and his mother Claire wanted him to choose between his father and her. Sean was completely sick of it, so he texted his mother saying, "Dylan should get to see both of his parents. If Gary didn't care about me and Dylan, he wouldn't have raised me. I'm not deciding between anyone. You're my mom, Gary's my dad, and Dylan is my brother. I want Dylan to have his mom and dad." Claire then later messaged Sean saying, "Him or us?" Sean replied back, "You just want Gary. You don't care about me or Dylan." And sadly, I think that's true. Sean had previously lived with Dylan and Claire in the home they shared on Elm Road in Limeside. However, sometime around October of 2021, he had moved out and into a flat with his girlfriend. Another part of the reason that Sean had moved out was because him and his mother had been at odds for months at that point. He, of course, still wanted to be there for his brother Dylan, though, so at Christmas time he stopped by to bring over some presents. But Claire would not allow him into the home, and Sean had to leave the presents across the street at his uncle's house. Starting in November of 2021, Claire's messages to Dylan's father, Gary, became rather concerning. In one voicemail she left him, she said, "Dylan's not leaving the house no more. I'm at my wit's end. I'm not carrying on like this." In a later message, she said, "We don't need you. He's done a year without you, and he's doing the rest of his life without you." And at the end of one particular voicemail that Claire left for Gary, Dylan's little voice can be heard saying, "Bye, Gary." And then Claire was heard telling her son, "He picked a girl over you." That's real nice. Then there was a voicemail she left for Gary in mid-December talking about their son Dylan, saying, "I promise you, you won't see him again. You'll see. Bye. Go and enjoy your life." At that point, I would have called the authorities personally. On Christmas Eve, Claire sent him another text message saying, "I've done this for a year, struggling on my own. I'm empty. I can't live much longer." And days later, on December 27th, Claire left him another message in which she said, "I promise you now, carrying on treating me like a knobhead, I promise you're never going to see my son again." And in another message, "Treat me like a dick and I'll stop you from seeing him." And again, a few days after that, on December 30th, she sent Gary another concerning text, and this one said, "You're just showing all you want to do is act like me and Dill were not in your life. And crack on, make a new life with your new bird. So you go and do that. I'll solve it for you. Go and enjoy your new life with her. And remember, you chose your slag," which is slang for slut. And then the next day, around 6:30 p.m. on New Year's Eve, Gary received another phone call from Claire. This time, he picked up, and she sounded more panicked than she had ever sounded before. Claire told him that Dylan had had an accident, and now his lips were blue and he wasn't breathing. Extremely concerned, Gary asked her if she had called the paramedics yet, but she told him that she hadn't. He told her she needed to immediately hang up and call them. He then got into his car and drove straight to Claire's house. Meanwhile, after Claire had hung up with Gary, she didn't immediately call for help. Instead, she ran across the street to her uncle's house. And she was so frantic that her uncle's partner, Joanne Wild, would be the one who ended up calling 999. After Claire had told her family there was something seriously wrong with Dylan, they all ran over to her house. And there they found him, lifeless in his bed with a significant amount of bruising to his head and body. Claire explained to them that a ladder had just fallen on top of Dylan. By the time that Dylan's father had arrived, the police were already there and he was not allowed inside the home. So Sean, who had also already arrived on the scene, would be the one who had to tell him that his son, Dylan, had not made it. The paramedics had declared Dylan as dead almost as soon as they had gotten there, because rigor mortis had already started to set in. And even though Claire had told her family that a ladder had fallen on top of Dylan, she told the paramedics a different story. She told them that Dylan had actually fallen down some stairs the day prior. She said that ever since he had fallen, she had been checking on him periodically, but he seemed fine. She also claimed that 20 minutes prior to her finding him unresponsive, he was running around the house, playing with the dog, and yelling, which is probably impossible since rigor mortis had already started to set in. A post-mortem examination found that Dylan had 64 separate injuries on his head and body. His numerous bruises had been sustained within days of his death, and they all looked to be non-accidental. However, these injuries would not have been substantial enough to have caused Dylan's death. When Dylan's toxicology report came back, it revealed that at the time he had died, he actually had 9 times the lethal dose of mirtazapine inside his system, which is the antidepressant that Claire had been prescribed. It, however, could not be said when the antidepressants were given to him or how many were given to him. But given the dosage, I would say that there were at least 10, if not more, pills. Claire had told multiple people that she had stopped taking her prescription about 4 to 5 months prior to Dylan's death. However, she had gone to pick up a prescription for it just 11 days prior to Dylan dying. which would have been December 20th. That was around the time that she had left the voicemail for Gary, telling him that he would never see his son again. Claire had been arrested at the scene after police and paramedics had become suspicious about how Dylan had actually died. And as Claire was being put into the police vehicle, she told an officer, "Please don't put me in a cell. I have anxiety and can't deal with a cell." Maybe that's something you should have thought about a little bit sooner, before you killed Dylan. Claire and Dylan's family did not know how it had come to this. They thought that Claire always adored her son, and he had been her reason for living. Once Claire was brought down to the police station, they obtained a blood sample from her, and it was discovered that she had mirtazapine in her system as well, however, only in a therapeutic dose. She was then assessed and found to be displaying psychotic symptoms. So Claire was sent to Edenfield Center in Prestwich for mental health treatment, where she would spend approximately 2 months. While she was being treated at Edenfield Center, Claire would actually tell 2 workers that she had been the one that killed her son Dylan. One worker said that she had told him she was holding Dylan when she had gone up into the attic to do something. She then said Dylan wiggled in her arms, which had caused her to drop him. He fell down the ladder that led up to the attic and landed at the bottom. But Claire told the worker that instead of going down to check on her son immediately, because that's a big fall, she continued to do what she was doing up in the attic. And when she was done, then she went to check on Dylan. However, he was not breathing when she finally got to him. So she said she picked him up and put him in his bed to keep him warm. I don't know why you would do that. Why wouldn't you call 911 immediately? And another worker at Edenfield Center said that on February 19th, she also had an interaction with Claire. While the worker had been monitoring the common area where the patients were, she saw Claire sitting in the corner of the room, looking out the window at the snow that was falling. Suddenly, Claire became very upset, so the worker helped her back to her room. Once back in her room, the worker asked Claire what was bothering her, to which Claire said, "I killed my child. I killed my baby." And during the time that she was being held in the hospital, on March 5th, 2022, Claire decided to call up Gary. As soon as he picked up the phone, she said to him, "This is all your fucking fault." He reminded her that he had a restraining order out against her and she shouldn't be calling him. Claire immediately hung up the phone after that. Following Claire's arrest and Dylan's death, police had searched the home, and they had found empty boxes of mirtazapine in the kitchen trash can. They had also found a handwritten note in Claire's bedside drawer and a black trash bag full of Dylan's baby photos. The note that police had found suggested that Claire had actually intended on taking both her and Dylan's lives that day. It read, "Don't let them see us, just cremate us. This all could have been avoided if his family and Gary had just left us alone." Also, during police's investigation, it was discovered that Dylan had been known to social services for years. But a care plan and further intervention had never been deemed as necessary. In late 2020, a concerned neighbor had actually called social services, saying that Dylan looked rather gray and gaunt. He looked like he was being starved, she said. In fact, many of the neighbors said that they had noticed a change in Dylan once Gary had left the home. Then, in June of 2021, another neighbor tipped off police saying that Dylan was possibly not being well cared for. They also said that the family's garden was overrun with rats and trash, and they hadn't seen Dylan playing outside all spring or summer. Authorities had then emailed social services to tell them about their concerns, but it's unclear if any action at all was taken. The last time that Dylan had been seen by his neighbors was the day prior to his death. He had actually been going to the corner store with his mother, and there were no signs that he had been hurt at that point. One of Claire's neighbors said that in the early hours on December 31st, she was in her back bedroom, and she heard a murmur of voices coming through the wall that she shared with Claire. She believed the voices were those of Dylan and Claire, and that Dylan had possibly just woken up in the middle of the night, and Claire was getting him back to bed. She said the murmurs lasted for 3 to 5 minutes, and then after that, she heard nothing more. Other neighbors who spoke with police after Dylan's death told them that they only ever heard screaming and arguing coming from the house, though it had gotten to be a little bit less after Gary left. They also said that Claire used to say hi to them and hold friendly conversations, But recently, she had been staying in the house, and when she did need to go out to go somewhere, she kept her head down and tried to avoid making eye contact with any of her neighbors. Now, even though Claire had been sent to a hospital for mental health treatment, she was still deemed fit to stand trial. And on June 13th, 2023, that trial began. The prosecution believed that Claire had taken the ultimate step in her anger to take Dylan away from his father for good. She had deliberately fed him the drug that had killed him. And in her anger, she had beat Dylan with sufficient enough force to bruise muscles on both sides of his head, as well as across his face. While giving evidence in the witness box, Claire was hidden from the public view. She was only seen by jurors, barristers, and the judge. During her first day on the stand, Claire denied ever hurting her son and was sticking to her story that he had just fallen down a few stairs. The court also heard how Claire had picked up a prescription for 56 tablets of mirtazapine in November and then again in December, even though she had claimed that she had stopped taking it months prior. This medication was only to be taken once a day, but by December 31st, Claire said she did not know how many pills she had left. The mother would also say that on the day Dylan died, she had found him to be a bit off, but she had not been the one to give him the antidepressants. She said she had also noticed that her son had a black eye, though she didn't know where it came from, and she said for this, she did give him some Calpol. For the most part, Claire mumbled and lied her way through the entire trial, saying, "I don't remember," to most of the questions she was asked. Claire did, however, remember that her uncle's partner, Joanne Wilder's granddaughter, returned to her house with her and had found Dylan unresponsive. Claire had then asked her to carry Dylan downstairs while she went into the bathroom and changed her clothes. The 38-year-old then said she did not remember emergency services arriving, but she did remember that she went to sort out a bag for her and Dylan because she thought they were just going to the hospital. Claire then alleged that she had no memory of anything that happened at the police station following her arrest, or her first month at Edenfield Hospital, where she was subsequently taken. She did, however, say she remembered when one staff member at Edenfield told her that Dylan's funeral had taken place, and upon hearing it, she had broke down crying. When she was questioned about the threatening text messages that she had sent to Gary in the weeks leading up to Dylan's death, Claire denied that she had ever told Gary he would never see his son again, or that she had ever threatened him, saying that she would harm herself. When the text message that she had sent to Gary on Christmas Eve saying that she was empty and couldn't live much longer was read out loud in court, she said that it meant nothing. She denied that she was planning on doing serious harm to either herself or Dylan, and that the note that police had previously found had been a note she had written when Gary had left over a year ago. But that would mean you were planning on killing yourself and Dylan back then? So either way, you were planning his murder. Doesn't look good. So even though Claire was claiming ignorance and could barely remember a thing, the fact of the matter is that she would have had to pop out each and every single tablet of the mirtazapine individually. And for the level that had been found in Dylan's body, there had to have been at least 10 pills that were popped out of the packet, if not more, which means there was definitely some premeditation to her son's death. Gary Keenan would also testify in court, and he would say that his relationship with Claire had always had its ups and downs. But throughout their 15-year relationship, Claire had always had a problem with his family. He also told the jury that it had been a long time since he had last seen his son. It had been on September 31st, 2021, the day before Dylan's 5th birthday. A couple months after that, in December, Gary had asked Claire if he could stop by to give his son his Christmas presents, but she had denied it. And outside of court, Gary would later say that giving away his son's Christmas presents to a kid of similar age was one of the hardest things he ever had to do. Gary believed that Claire had often been difficult about letting him see his son because what she really wanted was for the two of them to be back together so they could all be a family again. But Gary didn't want any of that. He just wanted to see Dylan, and that was that. Following Gary giving evidence, Claire's father, Michael Scanlon, took the stand. He said that since Claire had been arrested, she had called him many times from jail. During one phone call, he said that Claire had told him that she had tried to end her own life when she had killed Dylan. She said that she had also taken too many pills, but clearly it wasn't enough because she had woken up again. But when she got to the police station and they drew her blood, hours later, she only had a therapeutic dose in her system. So, not sure if I believe that one. Claire also claimed that she didn't remember making any of these phone calls to her father, even though, as he said, they were pretty consistent ever since she had been arrested. The trial lasted 5 weeks, and during closing statements, the defense told the jury that there was no evidence as to how the medication had gotten into Dylan's system. They also didn't know if the tablets had been crushed or put into a drink, or if Dylan had just taken them on his own. But he wouldn't have been able to punch them out of the packet, and there was only one adult in the house. So, you do the math. Claire's defense lawyer said, "There is nothing to say that Dylan was forced to take the tablets. There is nothing to tell you how they got in his system. Never once, not even in the note that Claire had left in her home, did she admit to actually giving the pills to Dylan." And the defense ran with that. The defense also wanted the jury to see Claire not as somebody who was angry, but rather as somebody who was just struggling with her Huntington's disease as well as her depression and anxiety. However, around the time of Dylan's death, Claire was constantly carrying out acts such as bringing Dylan back and forth to school, feeding him, interacting with Gary's solicitor, going food shopping, and shopping online. So she was capable of restraining herself from killing her son as well. Ultimately, Claire was found guilty of murder. However, when it came time for her sentencing hearing, Claire refused to show up, kind of like Adam Montgomery. She was still, however, given a life sentence with a minimum of 18 years. And Gary Keenan would say about his son, "He was a happy, adventurous, cheeky little boy who loved life. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that Claire would hurt Dylan. I don't think I will ever be the same person again. Every happy event is now tinged with sadness. Because Dylan is not here, I cannot sleep at night. I hold a lot of guilt because sometimes I think I should never have left." And Dylan's big brother Sean, who was at that point in his 20s, said, "Dylan is a much-loved and missed brother. A young boy of 5 whose life was stolen from him for no reason. In tragic and extreme circumstances. My final words are, Mum, I'm sure you're sorry for the hurt you've caused to us all, and I love you, because you are my mom, but I don't want you to hurt anyone else." He continued, "You know Dylan will never get the chance to go on holiday, have a career, or have a family. You know that you will never know the man that he would have become, because that was taken away from him by you." And soon after Dylan's death, members of the community, family, and friends stopped by the flat where he had once lived to leave balloons, flowers, toys, and stuffed animals, all in remembrance of the bright, happy, silly 5-year-old. Well, thank you for listening to Dylan's story today. I might believe that due to Claire's illness, she had forgotten that she had taken the pills out of the packet and Dylan had accidentally ingested them on his own, had he not also had bruising all over his body. It's like nothing mattered to Claire after her boyfriend, Dylan's father, had left her, not even her own children. And it makes me wonder if her abuse towards Dylan had started right after that, since there were some neighbors that had seen him looking gray and gaunt, and then he was not seen outside for months on end. But if so, how did her family, some of whom lived right across the street, not notice any signs of it? There's definitely more to the story here. Because also, why would Gary not have called the authorities, knowing how erratic Claire had been acting when she sent him the message saying he was never going to see his son again? So if you do like true crime and you want to hear it from me, then don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and turn on your notifications too, so you'll know when I upload a new video, which is about 2 times every week. Thanks for watching A Wicked World today. Until next time, take care guys. Bye. Thank you to all the patrons of A Wicked World. Now, there's even more of A Wicked World on Patreon. So check it out at patreon.com/awickedworld or use the Patreon app. You'll have access to exclusive videos each month and more. Any support truly helps to make sure the victims never get forgotten and to highlight the shortcomings of society associated with each case. Do you have a suggestion for a case you'd like to see me cover? If so, send me an email at awickedworldtruecrime@gmail.com.